Russia is responsible for producing 36% of the world's oil and gas supply. This is a problem because America only produces 12% of the world's gas production, and we are #1 out of all the countries in the world for gas usage. That includes China, who has 1 billion more people than America. We use 21% of the gas in the world, despite the fact that America only has 4% of the population. This makes gig economy workers who rely heavily on the price of gas highly dependent on the gas producing nations, and if you haven't realized, we're not exactly on good terms with the top dog of gas production, Russia. But all is not lost. Just because gas prices are going up doesn't mean that you should stop driving for a living. At the same time, there will be a point where driving doesn't make sense financially, and I'm here to help you figure out when that time might be for your personal situation. In order to make an informed decision, I'm going to do my best to oversimplify what's happening in the world and how it affects our business moving forward. With the war between Russia and Ukraine still underway, America and our NATO allies have imposed sanctions to Russia called SWIFT, which you might have heard President Biden talking about it, but he didn't do a good job of explaining what it actually meant. SWIFT stands for Society of Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, and it's a system that allows money to be transferred between different nations. Now that Russia has been booted from the transferring of money to different countries, Russia will no longer be able to sell their oil and gas, and that makes the world supply of gas smaller, even though the world is constantly using more and more. Are you starting to see the problem yet? Because I am. While I agree that excluding Russia from financially transacting with the rest of the world is the right call, I cannot pretend that it won't have an adverse effect on the American economy, specifically and especially for rideshare drivers, which includes me and probably you too, even if you're not a rideshare driver. Gas pricing has an effect on how much we pay for food and pretty much anything that requires a truck, plane, or ship to get here, and if you're living in America, that includes pretty much everything. While yes, the Russian and Ukraine war is going to have an effect on gas pricing, it's just not the whole story behind the increase of prices. The story actually starts at the beginning of the pandemic when gas prices were at their all-time low and the gig economy pay was at its all-time high. A month after the pandemic started, gas hit an average 3-year low of $1.88. Gig economy workers had to make a decision as to whether they wanted to continue driving or risk being infected before vaccines would become available. So while gas prices were at their all-time low, the amount of people who wanted to drive was also at the all-time low, but that gave willing drivers the ability to capitalize on the various bonuses that companies like Lyft and Uber were giving out. Personally, I was earning an extra $500 a week, and I was even able to make just under $900 in one day, which I even made a video about, so make sure you check that out, it'll be posted below. As the world started to learn more about how Mr. 19 was spreading, states started to ease up on restrictions, which made people more comfortable with traveling, which increased the price of gas from $1.88 to $2.25 since there was now a higher demand for gas. Once vaccines became available, this only caused gas prices to jump exponentially, and that's because people became more comfortable with traveling, and that all relates to the law of supply and demand. When demand for a good goes up and the supply is unable to keep up with that demand, sellers are able to increase prices for the goods, and in this case, gas. Fast forward to the start of 2022, gas prices settled in at $3.38, which is 1.8 times higher than what we saw at the start of the pandemic. The increase can be attributed to how Mr. 19 affected production and transportation of oil and gas to America. Specifically, places like California were hit the hardest due to their inability to offload incoming shipments that were backed up due to Mr. 19. Now with the pandemic coming to an end, the Russia-Ukraine conflict adds to the compounding oil and gas problems. With the war between Russia and Ukraine still ongoing, it makes sense that the gas prices are starting to see a climb, and the amount of people who use gas and oil remains the same, but the supply of gas and oil will be on the decline, which increases the prices. However, in order to help with the rising cost of gas, President Biden did say that he plans to implement policies to ease the increase in gas prices, but that doesn't mean that the prices won't go up, just means that we won't feel the full effect of it. But how much of the effect will we feel? Let me know what the gas prices are in your city. I'm very interested in knowing what's going on out there beyond the scope of my own town. So let me know in the comments below. But here's why I'll continue to go all in on the gig economy and how to best determine when enough is enough as it becomes time to transition into a new way to make money. Wars and conflicts have effects on the pricing of gas, and the pricing of gas has an effect on how many people are willing to drive for companies like Lyft or Uber. When gas prices increase, drivers are way more likely to stay home, and that gives other drivers like me and you the ability to capitalize on bonuses that Lyft and Uber use to encourage encourage more drivers. The same way gas prices are controlled by supply and demand is the same exact way companies like Uber and Lyft hand out bonuses. This creates a war of attrition between rideshare drivers. Attrition warfare is a tactic of wearing down your opponent in the long-term battle. The more rideshare drivers are willing to be patient, is the more they will benefit from increased rider demand and bonuses once the other drivers start to believe that it's not worth driving anymore. But who's right? The ones that stay home or the ones that keep driving? In order to come up with the least biased answer, I decided to rely on math. In my last video where I made $3,000 in 1 week, I came to the conclusion that I was spending $6 an hour on business expenses, including but not limited to gas, insurance, and oil changes. My net profit, which is calculated after I consider my expenses, was $32 per hour worked. Before Russia turned the world upside down, I was always happy if I made at least $25 an hour after expenses, and even with the increase in gas prices since the start of the war, I'm still doing much better than that. And that's because the amount of drivers on the road has been decreasing and I've been getting more bonuses as a result. So despite the fact that my expenses are increasing, if the amount of money I make per hour increases with it, then it doesn't make sense to stop. So my personal recommendation for you is to determine how much money you need to make after expenses and taxes to take care of your business. And as long as you're satisfying that goal, you should keep driving no matter what the price of gas is. Just remember, the only way to truly know if it's worth it is to calculate your net earnings per hour, and I'll show you how to do that in my next video. So make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on that. So until then, keep earning.